It was a Tuesday, but not just any Tuesday. This Tuesday was a rainy, drippy, dreary sort of day. The kind of day where the world outside seemed to be crying big, splishy, splashy tears all over the windows. I was bored. Terribly, horribly, Ramona Quimby level bored. Mom said I should find something quiet to do, which usually meant reading a book or drawing. But the rain made me feel fidgety. I couldn't sit still. I had already organized my crayon box twice, once by color and once by size. My feet wanted to go exploring, even if it was just inside the house where I had lived my whole entire life. So I decided to explore the attic. The attic was a place of mystery and dust bunnies. It was where old things went to be forgotten. Dad always said, "Be careful up there, Leo," because the floorboards were creaky and it was filled with lumpy shapes covered in white sheets, like sleeping ghosts. I pulled down the folding ladder from the ceiling in the hallway. It made a loud groaning sound, like it was waking up from a very long nap. I climbed up, step by careful step, my sneakers making soft thuds on the wood. The air smelled old, like paper and wood and time itself, a smell that was both spooky and exciting. The attic was dark, except for one small round window at the very end. Raindrops tapped against the glass, making the only sound besides my own breathing. I flicked on the single light bulb that hung from a long cord. It cast long dancing shadows everywhere. There were boxes labeled Christmas, old clothes, and kitchen stuff. I peeked into the Christmas box and saw a tangle of lights and a Santa with a chipped nose. I poked at a lumpy ghost, which turned out to be just my grandfather's old armchair. It was less scary and more just sad, sitting all alone up here in the dark. My mission was to find something interesting, something that wasn't just dusty old junk. I wiggled past a stack of old magazines and a bicycle with a flat tire. In the farthest, darkest corner, tucked behind a big brown trunk with rusty latches, was a small wooden box. It wasn't labeled like the others. It was just a plain, dark wood box, no bigger than my lunchbox. It didn't look like it was meant to be found. It looked like a secret. My heart did a little flip-flop. This was it. This was the treasure I had been looking for on this dreary, rainy day. My fingers felt shaky as I reached for the small wooden box. It was smooth and cool to the touch, and a thin layer of dust came off on my fingertips. I wiped them on my jeans and carefully lifted the lid. There was no lock, just a simple little hinge that creaked open quietly. Inside, nestled on a piece of faded red velvet, was not a treasure of gold or jewels, but something much more curious. There was a small folded piece of paper. It was yellowed with age, the way old book pages get, and the edges were soft and worn. It was tied with a thin blue ribbon that had faded to the color of a pale sky. I sat down right there on the dusty floorboards, my legs crossed. The single light bulb above made a little pool of light around me. Very, very carefully, I untied the blue ribbon. The knot was tiny and delicate. It came undone with a gentle pull. I unfolded the paper. The creases were so deep that I was afraid it might tear apart in my hands. The letter was written in beautiful, loopy handwriting, the kind I only ever saw in old movies. The ink was a faded brown color. It wasn't addressed to anyone I knew. It was written to someone named My Dearest Eleanor, and it was signed With All My Love, Thomas. I started to read the words. It was a love letter, a very sad love letter. Thomas was writing to Eleanor to say goodbye. He wrote that his family did not approve of their love and that he was being sent away. He promised he would never forget her and hoped that one day they could find each other again. He wrote about her laugh, which he said sounded like wind chimes. My heart felt heavy reading his words. The letter was dated over 70 years ago. Who were these people? And why was this secret letter hidden in our attic? My grandmother's name was Eleanor. Suddenly, the attic felt different. It wasn't just a place for old forgotten things anymore. It was a place that held a real story, a real secret from a long, long time ago. I held the letter in my hand and felt a strange connection to this person named Thomas and to the grandmother I knew only from photographs. This piece of paper felt more important than anything else in the whole attic. It was a piece of a life that had been hidden away. I carefully folded it back up, retied the faded blue ribbon and placed it back in its box. I knew I couldn't keep this a secret. I climbed back down the creaky attic ladder, clutching the small wooden box to my chest. My heart was thumping like a drum. The house was quiet except for the sound of the rain and the hum of the refrigerator. I found Mom in the kitchen, chopping carrots for dinner. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. "Find any treasures up there, adventurer?" she asked, her voice cheerful. I couldn't answer right away. I just walked over to the kitchen table and placed the box down gently. Her smile faded a little when she saw the serious look on my face. "I found this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I opened the box and showed her the letter. Mom put down her knife and wiped her hands on a towel. She picked up the letter with a puzzled expression and carefully untied the ribbon, just as I had done. She read it slowly, her brow furrowed in concentration. As she read, her eyes grew wide. She read it a second time, her lips moving silently with the words. "Oh my," she breathed. She looked from the letter to me, and her face was a mixture of surprise and something else, something I couldn't quite name. It looked like she was seeing a puzzle piece she never knew was missing. "We need to show this to Grandpa," Mom said, her voice soft but firm. She called Dad at work and told him to come home a little early, saying it was important. When Dad got home, he saw the box on the table and the serious faces of Mom and me, and he knew something was up. We all waited for Grandpa to arrive. He lived just a few blocks away and often came for dinner. When he walked in, shaking the rain from his coat, we were all sitting silently at the kitchen table. "What's all this?" he asked, looking at our somber faces. "Is everything all right?" he asked with concern in his voice. Mom slid the open letter across the table toward him. "Leo found this in the attic, Dad," she said gently. "It was in a box behind the old trunk." Grandpa picked up the letter. He didn't need his reading glasses. He recognized the handwriting instantly. He held the yellowed paper in his hands, which trembled just a little bit. He was silent for a long time, just staring at the words written by a man named Thomas. The only sound in the kitchen was the ticking of the clock on the wall and the steady pitter-patter of the rain outside. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for him to speak. Grandpa finally looked up from the letter. There were tears in his eyes, but he was smiling a sad, gentle smile. "Thomas," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I haven't heard that name in a lifetime." He told us the story. His mother, my great-grandmother Eleanor, had been deeply in love with a young man named Thomas. He was a kind boy, a musician, but his family was very poor. Eleanor's parents, my great-great-grandparents, did not approve. They believed she should marry someone with more money and status. They forbade her from seeing him and eventually sent Thomas's family away with a threat. He told us that Eleanor was heartbroken. She waited for Thomas, but he never came back. A few years later, she met my great-grandfather and married him. She had a good life, Grandpa said. She loved her husband, and she loved her children, including my grandpa. But a small part of her heart, he explained, had always remained sad. She kept this one letter, the last one Thomas ever sent her, as a secret reminder of her first love. She must have hidden it in the attic, a private memory she couldn't bear to part with. We all listened, completely captivated by this story of a life we never knew. Hearing the story changed everything. It made my great-grandmother Eleanor seem more real than the smiling lady in the black and white photos. She wasn't just a name from the past. She was a young woman with a secret heartbreak, with feelings and hopes that were just like ours. Grandpa shared more memories of his mother, things he hadn't thought about in years. He talked about how she sometimes looked out the window with a faraway look in her eyes. And now, for the first time, he understood why. Sharing the secret didn't make us sad. It felt like we were honoring her memory. As we sat there, the rain finally stopped, and a little bit of late afternoon sun peeked through the clouds. The kitchen felt warm and full. It was full of stories, full of history, and full of love. Finding that letter had been like finding a missing piece of our family's heart. We weren't just a family that lived in a house with a dusty attic. We were a family with a story, a deep and beautiful one. We were closer than ever, bound together by the truth of a yellowed letter and the love of a woman named Eleanor. The secret wasn't a burden, it was a gift that had brought us all together.